Do you have that Fox 38 taste, but you're on a Yari budget? Me too. This is a completely blown out Yari I bought for $100, and I've got every single part to make this the most amazing fork ever made as far as the budget department goes. Upon disassembly of the Rockshox Yari, I can see someone did not rebuild this damper correctly, and it's not working. This is undoubtedly the best air shaft Rockshox has ever built. It's from a pre-2023 Rockshox Boxer 180mm. Quick lesson on why new forks can feel a little bit harsh. From this seal up is the positive chamber, and from this seal down is the negative chamber. We can see how massive the negative air chamber is on the Rockshox Boxer air spring. If we look at the Yari, it's like 3 times as big. The Rockshox Boxer is probably the most plushest, best riding fork, Fox 38-like fork you can get from Rockshox. The Rockshox Yari is technically rated to 180mm air spring, but they're a little bit different in size. Let's see if it fits. It looks like the Boxer air spring is way up in there. Taking the stock Rockshox Boxer lower seal head off and putting the Yari one on. Let's see if it fits. With the Boxer air spring in there, there's just no room for volume tokens. This is even too sketchy for me. You can't get any volume spacers in the fork. So the air spring on the Boxer is not gonna work. The only difference between the Yari air spring and the Boxer air spring is this thing is a lot longer. The main shaft and the seal head or the piston has an extra big negative air chamber. After 3 hours of hammering, trying to remove this seal head so I could put the Boxer seal head on it, I just can't get it. So I busted the drill out on a 150mm air spring, and I was able to remove it, but not without damage. So these seal heads are non-removable from the factory. This is a absolute sketch fest, so if you do this, just know you're on your own. I don't recommend you modifying air springs or suspension for that matter, but what we're trying to do is increase the negative volume chamber of the Rockshox Yari air spring to give it a more plush ride. The Boxer spring, I just want to use that seal head on the Yari air spring, but it's not gonna work. So after sitting here thinking for a couple hours, I've got a marvelous idea. With so many different air shafts laying around, I decided to put 2 top-out bumpers on the stock Rockshox Yari air spring. As you can see, it makes the volume chamber a lot bigger in the negative side. There's no good way around a good damper, so I'm putting the Charger 2.1. If you can't afford one, just go with a 10mm longer air spring. The breakaway pressure is very nice, not normal of Rockshox. No idea what the travel's gonna end up as. Get a little piece of cardboard, mark a line on the max travel, and then measure it. It looks like 2 top-out bumpers makes about 10mm less than the rated spring. First test run on the Rockshox Yari Supreme. It's always a nail biter. Don't know what's gonna happen. The fork is definitely more plush, but something feels wrong. Purposely hucking it to flat, and I just can't use the travel. It feels like I'm hitting a wall. I hope I'm not breaking something inside of the fork. Very interesting. It's starting to sound like a Fox fork with that increased negative air chamber. I did a couple test runs, got my rebound as fast as I could possibly go, and it was starting to feel a little bit better, but something was just not right. Small bump sensitivity was next level. Going over this fire road, it's very active. What a negative air chamber does is isolates your hands from all that chatter. It just makes you a very plush, smooth ride and no arm pump. Despite all the fork's plushness, it was riding like crap. It was not jumping good. A quick look at the O-ring will tell you what's wrong. I'm not using all the travel, and I'm not gonna go down in any pressure because this is a Rockshox product. Realizing I had put 3 tokens in the fork, it was worth taking those out. Every Yari in the past, I've always had to run 3 tokens on an e-bike, so that's why there was 3 in there. I just put 1 back in. Let's go take a ride. Once again, the Rockshox Yari Supreme feels like a completely different fork with the volume spacers removed from it. This same section I did before, I was actually able to use all the travel. The fork feels freaking amazing, very playful and plush. Shockingly, I needed to add some high-speed compression because I was using all the travel. Good idea to use a high-end damper if you have a huge negative air chamber. Purposely hucking these little jumps to flat, trying to feel out the Yari. I'm thoroughly impressed by it. The difference between a stock Yari and the Yari Supreme is unparalleled. It does have the Charger 2.1 damper, that definitely does help.
The Rockshox Yari jump line.
The Yari Supreme's larger negative air chamber provides a more plush ride, but typically a smaller negative air chamber will give you better performance on jumps or heavy hits. There's definitely a decrease in performance on the Yari Supreme when hitting jumps. Another thing to note, a large negative air chamber will make more noise. I'm not the first person to come up with a bigger negative volume chamber for Rockshox products. Vorsprung Luft Cap will essentially do the same thing. The only problem with the Vorsprung, not compatible with the newer style seal head because this is unremovable. You have to buy the original Solo air spring. I have one on order, it was like $8. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do the Vorsprung or not. We're gonna keep testing that Rockshox Yari Supreme and see how it does. So I've been on the Yari for like half a mile on these other trails and it's freaking amazing, but I've had to crank the compression way up. Let's go test it. Super interesting combo to have a very plush fork that's supportive on the big hits. It does complicate setup because you need to add some low speed compression to keep the fork high in its travel on steep sections. The high speed compression is also necessary. After a couple miles of pounding downhill lines, I noticed the fork felt stiffer, almost like it was a bigger stanchioned fork. So what happens is when you have a super heavy bike or you're extremely talented, when you hit square-edged hits, the fork can kind of deflect and feel noodly. I'm not particularly the best rider, so it's not the biggest deal, but the Rockshox Yari Supreme, with its increased negative air chamber, feels stiffer. I'm just a practically minded mechanic, not an engineer, so don't take my word for it. Could be placebo. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through this as fast as I can and show you what it looks like. There was a huge rock in my rear wheel in the last run. Let's retest it after removing that baby head. The fork definitely feels stiffer and it looks stiffer in the rock gardens. It just pops back into the lower part of the travel quicker.
Okay, smooth blue flow trails. This has always been where the Yari and the Lyric really did good. They're just super fun, fast moving. 100% opinion, but I find the Yari Supreme more plush than Buttercups. It does come with a compromise of a little bit less predictability. The Rockshox Yari is targeted at entry-level riders who want predictability. If you're a little more advanced, go for a Luft Cap because keep in mind, if you're Harry Potter like me, messing around with suspension, you might end up like Voldemort or worse. It's only been about 20 miles on the Rockshox Yari Supreme. This isn't the end, but you gotta click this video here, Rockshox vs. Fox, to get the full picture of the Yari Supreme and what it's really like on both brands.